On this episode of No Holds Barred, we're going to talk about clearing your criminal records. You asked, well, why should I do that, or what's that all about? Everyone who has a license of any kind, who has a conviction, who's coached youth sports, has a record with the California Department of Justice. Tell you how that works. If you're a coach in youth sports nowadays, you have to be fingerprinted, and those fingerprints go up on a form to the California Department of Justice. Call it a rap sheet. It's really a CINI. It's a record of you and your identification. And it tells the employer or the youth sports team if you have a criminal record. The main reason why they do it is they certainly want to see if any of their coaches have criminal records or 2-9 registrants or anything such as that. But what I recommend for people is everybody go on the California Department of Justice website, put in an application to get a copy of your rap sheet. So whether it's a criminal rap sheet or just coaching, or if you sold cars, or if you're a lawyer or a doctor, there is a record in the California Department of Justice of you. Why does this come up all the time? People come to our firm and say, I had a misdemeanor 20 years ago, or I had a felony conviction 30 years ago when I was very young. And I'm worried about it, and I heard that you can expunge those records. And the troublesome thing is lawyers all over have websites that say, expunge your records. And that is actually a misnomer. Expunging means completely wiping it clear, and that rarely ever happens. So I'm going to go through some of the processes that we have in California for clearing criminal records. And the one that most people use and most lawyers talk about is Penal Code Section 1203.4. And that is, first of all, if it's a felony, to have it reduced to a misdemeanor and then have it dismissed. And there's a process that you go through. In many cases, the court doesn't even require an appearance. It's just a filing of the forms. But you can download those forms. We recommend that you get a lawyer to assist you. And that's the kind of work that we often do, is we assist people in clearing their criminal records. 1203.4, you fill it out, you sign it, it's filed with the court. The court then sends a copy of that to the probation department. The probation department then will look at your rap sheet or CINI, they'll look at the history of it, and they will make a recommendation back to the Superior Court. Superior Court then issues a ruling, or in some cases requires a hearing where you have to go in with your lawyer and have a discussion as to why you think your case should be dismissed. But what I want to tell people, and I often say, it's not expunged. If it is granted, and that, let's say, a felony burglary conviction is reduced to a misdemeanor and then dismissed. But on your rap sheet, it shows the conviction, it shows the 1203.4 application, it shows it was reduced, and it shows it was dismissed. So it's not expunged. So any employer or anyone that requires you to provide for them the ability to look at your rap sheet is going to be able to look and see that you have that prior record. Now, with a straight face, you can say to someone, I don't have a conviction. Because under 1203.4, once it's dismissed, you can say, I've never been convicted of a crime. Except if you're applying for law school, if you're applying to be a policeman, or any other kind of licensure with the state of California, a teacher, something like that, you have to actually explain that, yes, you've had a dismissal, but in the past, this is what happened. So law students who years ago had some kind of conviction, even though it's been dismissed under 1203.4, they have to explain it. They have to put it in their application, what happened. And many people are embarrassed about that. But that's just something you just have to do. It's very important. And I want to say, from selling insurance to selling real estate, to applying to law school, medical school, selling cars, anything such as that, being a teacher, all requires that you disclose that kind of thing. So expunging is not something that happens. Now, there is a Penal Code section 851.8, and that is factual innocence. That's another form, that's another process. That process is actually where you go in with your petition and show that you were factually innocent. And what happens with that petition, it goes to the police agency involved, it goes to the probation department, and it goes to the court. In order to have that granted, you have to make a showing that you were factually innocent. You did not commit that crime. And in that case, if that is granted, then the order is that the record be completely wiped out, not only at the police agency, at the court, but at the Department of Justice. So it should not show up on your rap sheet. But I will say, our government is not perfect, as you might expect. And what happens is, by checking your CI&I or your rap sheet, you may find that there's something on there that's incorrect. It shows a conviction for a petty theft way back when that's not yours. Or you filed an 851.8, it was granted, and 2 or 3 months later, you look to ensure that it happened, that it's removed, and it hasn't been removed. So it's one of those things, as I recommend, go look at your rap sheet right now, Department of Justice. It takes a little time, but download it. But after you file a 1203.4 or an 851.8, don't just leave it at that. Go back several months later, reapply, get a copy of it to ensure that what you wanted to happen has actually happened. Because as we know, things don't always happen, and we've seen many cases where an 851.8 was granted, but it actually didn't clear. Now, several years ago, the County of Alameda was appreciating that many of the young people in their county couldn't get jobs because they had prior felony convictions. So with the agreement of the District Attorney's Office and the Superior Court in Alameda County, and a wink and a nod, people were allowed to file 851.8s when they actually weren't factually innocent. They had committed the offenses. But wink, wink, nod, the courts granted them, and the District Attorney's Office went along with it. And that is something that some counties have looked at in the past. Alameda County no longer does that, but it is something potentially that people can look at when there's a significant number of young people that have crimes and they'd like their records cleared. Now that is where expungement comes in. That term, when an 851.8 is successful, that record is expunged. That record is expunged. Now I want to say, as to 1203.4s and 851.8s, they only apply to convictions where the person was not sentenced to state prison and did time in state prison. 1203.4 and 851.8 does not apply to convictions if you serve time in state prison. So for state prison, you actually have to go to the governor and you have to file a petition for a certificate of rehabilitation. Many times you have to get witnesses, you have to get people to write good character for you, and you actually make an application for a certificate of rehabilitation. And once that is granted, and they're rarely granted, but once that's granted, then you can get some help with your rap sheet for a conviction that required you to go to state prison. People often talk about the application for clemency. Clemency in general, we hear about it. Every president, once just before he goes, his term ends and he goes off into retirement, you hear of the clemency or the pardons that are granted. That's on the federal side. We do the same. Governors many times on the state side, and here in California you often hear about Governor Brown or people granting clemency or pardons. Clemency is actually a reduction in the sentence time. That's theoretically what it is. Somebody is granted clemency, and let's say they were sentenced to 20 years, and the governor grants them clemency, and they actually it reduces the amount of time that they have to spend in jail. It does not take the conviction away. It certainly does not expunge the record. There is, however, a pardon, and you've often heard of that. Both presidents and governors at the end, for whatever reason, choose. The process is supposed to go through the Department of Justice, and in the state of California, there's actually a department in the governor's office that reviews the requests for clemency and pardons. If a pardon is granted, then you are pardoned. The crime did not occur. Your record is cleared, and you can say with a straight face on any application that you did not suffer any kind of a conviction. Now let's go back to 1203.4s and 851.8s. In a 1203.4, and people often ask this because we know you cannot possess a weapon in the state of California, a firearm, if you have been convicted of a felony. You can't under any circumstances. Under an 851.8, where factual innocence is found and it's granted, you did not suffer a felony conviction. Under 1203.4, however, even if you have it reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor and then dismissed, with a straight face you can tell people you weren't convicted unless you're seeking a state licensure, but you can never possess a gun. So even though it has been dismissed, and that's where people get into problems seeing lawyers and saying, my record has been expunged, and I went to try to buy a gun, I filled out all the forms, and they notified me, the California Department of Justice said I had a conviction, but it was expunged. Well, no, it wasn't expunged. Under 1203.4, it was dismissed, but it's not expunged. So under no circumstances can you possess a gun. And you can still be charged by a district attorney's office with felon in possession of a firearm even after you've gone through that 1203.4. What is the bottom line of all of this is know what your rap sheet says. If you've been convicted of a crime, talk to a lawyer. Do all the research you want, and you certainly can go online and you can Google Penal Code Section 1203.4, Penal Code Section 851.8, the Penal Code section for having the governor grant you clemency or a pardon or a certificate of rehabilitation. It's all there. But we recommend that you retain counsel, and the counsel, experienced counsel who knows what the process is and puts you in a position where you're in the best spot for moving forward. I have to say, too many times someone has come to me and said, I was busted for a gun, and I bought it lawfully from a friend of mine. I had it, and the police did a search warrant on my house for whatever reason, for my roommate or something, and they found the weapon in the house, and I've been charged with a felony. But I went through 1203.4. I went through that. And I said, well, it didn't expunge. Your lawyer misrepresented what he or she could do for you. It's not expunged, and it's very important. So, lesson 1, find out what your rap sheet says, California Department. Lesson 2, follow up on it after you've done anything. And lesson 3, check it maybe a year later, but understand which one of those penal code sections applies to you and whether or not you have a duty to advise employers whether or not you had some kind of a conviction. How does it come up in other instances where you're not applying for licensure? Let's say you're going to work for Safeway. You're applying for Safeway. Many private employers ask you to sign a waiver so that they can take a look at your Department of Justice rap sheet. Now, the legislature is looking at that and trying to say, okay, we're changing the rules. We're ensuring that no applications for private employment in California say, have you ever been convicted of a felony? So you've seen that's gone away. And one of the reasons is that keeps people from applying for work. But it doesn't mean that employers can't ask you to sign that waiver, just like, and it's a waiver when you coach youth sports. So when I coached youth sports, I signed a waiver. I went down to the local UPS store and had my live scan fingerprints, went up to the Department of Justice and came back to the sports team, in this case Pleasant Hill Baseball Association, and nope, this guy's clear. He can coach. So that's just a little bit of what goes on, and I'd like you all to think about that. If you need any help in that, we're happy to chat with you. Give our firm a call, and we can help walk you through the entire process. So that's it for our episode of No Holds Barred. Stay tuned for the next episode.